All right, I thought I would give an example of a situation for the left and the right where wisdom beats cunning, and or like an example of cunning versus wisdom and so on. So, um, there's talk that Ben-Hur has a gay subtext. I don't know if that's true or not, but okay, let's say it is. That's kind of a cunning thing, in a way, but it's also kind of a wisdom thing in a way too. It depends on exactly the definition or like the exact demarcation of how obvious it was to the person on average who was going to see the movie at the time that it came out. Um, One of the ways that I'll give an example of wisdom as opposed to cunning, um, which is in political context today. Right wing memes are not actually hidden. The right wing will actively talk about the situation amongst themselves. So if a leftist actually wanted to like investigate what the right wing's up to, they could just like look at the discourse and kind of like figure out what the right is talking about and learn what the right is talking about seriously. And to learn what the right is talking about seriously means you understand their memes seriously as well. Now, the right has a very common sense approach to these things and a very basic foundational understanding and so on. So there's a lot of contradictory, like they show contradictions in the leftist thinking at the moment in the current climate and culture and political environment. And what this means is the right is using wisdom and the left thinks the right is using cunning because the right is not being paid attention to by the left. Um, for all their covert dog whistle claims, the right has never really too much tried to hide their politics. Um, they are their ideas and concepts are a very open secret. Judicious use of subtlety to avoid detection or technically avoid the bannable uh, declarations isn't even cunning, it's wisdom. Because you're not trying to hide every detail or mislead people. You're basically just saying, I'm technically not doing the thing you'll ban me for. But I'm doing spiritually the same thing. And it's like a common concept. It's like a very common behavior amongst the right currently. They're not, like, if they could be, they would be more honest online and like blunt and obvious in their declarations. They're not trying to hide it to sneak past your complete notice. They're only trying to hide it to the point that you cannot justifiably say, I'm going to hurt you over it. Um, and they would be more blunt and obvious in their comments and concepts and so on if you weren't going to hurt them over it. And generally speaking, the concepts they use are not actually bad compared to the left's version. Like, the left might not like them, but if the left were not in power, and the right were not in power, and like the center was in power, then the center would be like, oh yeah, the right's fine, generally, you know, whereas the left would be like, not fine generally. And that's the true center, because that's the majority opinion. It's only a special group of people influencing social media that make the right partially conceal their concepts to avoid being banned or attacked or something like that physically and so on, because the left is very bloodthirsty. It's sort of like being esoteric and so on, but also another example of this is the Templar's cross on churches or something, or certain symbols on churches to denote the Templars or the Celtic pagan myths of English churches. It's not saying you're totally loyal to it. It's not saying we're going to pretend we're not it completely. It's sort of like saying we're it, but in a way that doesn't necessitate the Inquisition. Another example of wisdom, as opposed to cunning, basically, is family entertainment. Now, there's children's entertainment, there's teenage entertainment, there's adult entertainment. But basically, well, actually, I'll give an example. There's a video of a black girl, and then the video pans to the comments, and it's of Femto Griffith. And basically, the point is, she's an attractive black woman with short hair, and if you never know who Femto is or Griffith, it's just sort of looks like a weird Batman or something, and it's like a sort of like a stare. But if you know who Femto and Griffith are, you know his relationship to Casca. So it's one of those things that can fly under the radar unless you look into it and you know how to look for it. So it's innocuous to most people, but it's a dog whistle. However, it's not a dog whistle that says you have to search high and low to understand any of it. It's literally like you could literally just copy paste the image and search the Google image search, and then like look for the associated names according to it, like Femto and Griffith, and then look up Femto and Griffith. It's relatively simple for a modern person to do, basically. You know, you don't have to be a genius at it. You can just kind of do like 2 or 3 searches and you'll find the answer. And the answer is Femto rapes the shit out of Casca. And that's the reason why Guts, the protagonist of Berserk, is constantly out to kill him. And why Guts is a lot better than Griffith or Femto um, despite his obvious moral failings. And a bunch of other stuff Griffith and Femto do. Like, they just constantly add things that they're awful about, whereas Guts is like constantly fighting his own worst impulses. So it's like a character analysis of like someone who becomes good and someone who becomes evil. But family entertainment is the kind of thing where you make, like, if you, like, okay, if you are, if you're a child and someone in a show says, I'd like to biblically know them, or know them biblically, then for a regular child, that just means kind of like learn about them through the Bible, or learn about them in a way that relates to the Bible. But an adult who studied the Bible and learned the birds and bees speech or lesson or whatever will understand that when someone says, I want to get to know you, it means sex. But the family entertainment is only hiding it from the child because it's not the appropriate time for them to understand the concept, because it's harmful at that time. But if that same child were to grow up into an adult with mostly the same information, except the added dimension of sexuality, because they've grown to an adult, then they would be in on the joke when they watch the family entertainment with their own children. So that's wisdom versus cunning. Wisdom allows you to grow into the inside joke or secret, and it doesn't totally prevent you from doing so at all costs. It's not designed to fool you forever. It's not like a blatant lie that you just hope no one ever finds out. It's a level of development, gate locked thing you can grow into. And as you grow up, it generally becomes more readily understandable, and the surrounding things about it link to each other. So it's something you can grow into understanding reasonably easily. You know, when they say right-wing dog whistles, it's not quite, I mean, maybe it's a dog whistle of a sort nowadays because of the whole, like, you get banned for being honest thing, which is not a good thing for what the right's receiving. It's not a good thing that the right's receiving this, because they are better than the left in most ways. And they're more honest. Another example of this is Jesus' parables. Jesus gave the parables so that those who understood wisdom would understand the stories and the principles behind them, who are associated with the general body of information. And those who are completely blind to that general body of information won't understand it because they're not ready for it. And then he gives his disciples the insider scoop to a certain extent, and then future theologians unpack different aspects to it that are deeper on top of that later on. Now, like I said, there's a spread of wisdom and truth and goodness that descends from God. And the whole promise of heaven is that we have a permanent relationship with God, and we get to see Him as He actually is and fully. However, we sort of develop, when we get to heaven, we don't just sit there in like a field or like in clouds and play harps and stuff like that. We actually are supposed to, like, it's supposed to be a place where you can develop and grow infinitely in your essence and existence and understanding and complexity and goodness and stuff like that. It's like all of these things at once. And basically, that's the proper method of approaching subtlety and flying under the radar and sneakiness in general populations. So you're not being a super secret agent. You're being like a what's called a what's the word, gradual revelation or something, um, continual revelation, increasing revelation, developing revelation, progressive revelation. I think it's progressive revelation. You know, where you're like you're getting people in on the secrets more over time as they grow. And that's the reason for it with God and mankind. Because can you imagine blowing the mind of like a caveman with like the insider knowledge of quantum physics? They wouldn't know what to do with it. And if you offloaded the entirety of current human knowledge, what the hell are they going to do? They don't know where to start, left, right, or center, forwards, backwards, up, or down. So it needs to be grown over time. And that's what evolution is in a way too, with the increasing complexity of life forms compared to before. So there's like an embodiment factor, and there's also like a habitual refinement factor. A refinement factor in body and technique that is relatively consistent, but adapts and grows over time. And maybe some secrets are lost, or like more people don't know what to do than before on some of the primitive things, but they understand the things and how to navigate the current events with the current technology and development and infrastructure level, um, and so on. And one of the big fears is a technological reset where we lose our ability to function at the level we've established. And one of the fears is that if we do that, then we'll simply not have the resources available at the more primitive technological level, because we've used them all, to get back up to where we are now or further. Because the like literally like like the oil or the coal or the iron or the steel or whatever that could be gotten by using bronze pickaxes, if we went to the Bronze Age again, with that level of understanding of how to mine and refine and grow crops or whatever, and drill holes and make pipes and stuff like that. Um, um, all the readily available resources at the previous levels of technology are used up. And the fear is that we will gate lock ourselves permanently out of growing back to where we are now if we fall back, or and obviously that means gate locking ourselves from further progression too. However, the thing is, it's a reasonably solid situation where the ability to function at the level we're at now is relatively stable functionally. And that's one of the reasons why a big population with lots of people who kind of like, if you have like 10 people out of a billion that understand how to like do quantum physics, then that's better than like 1 out of 100. So more people with more specialists in various fields, as a like more people specializing in small, like if you have 1 million people or something, right? And you have like 100 specialists in every field for everything. Divide 1 million by 100, and that's how many groups you have for every like specialized fields. Then you're more stable and secure because the more people exist that can spread the information to more people if it's necessary on how to deal with those fields and specializations than if you have like 1 out of 10. Like, granted, you have a higher ratio of the total population with the 1 out of 10 that understand how to do it, but you have less absolute scale people. And one of the things about information is it can be shared to benefit people. And, well, yeah, that's what it comes down to. So, yeah. That's one reason why a larger population can be good in some ways. That's one of the reasons also why I kind of I don't want to dip below 6 billion people in the world, but I kind of sense that like currently we're a little bit overboard on the population. But at the same time, I'm not worried about it too much because it seems like the global population will shrink in the future. Naturally, based on the course of progress and so on. And that'll be for a while. And it's literally just a product of like Islam and Hinduism and Chinese communism aborting so many girls that they just don't have the reproductive power they once did. So it's literally that the mostly male population is going to age and die off somewhat, because they don't have women to have children with. Because women are the gatekeepers of reproduction. Like, literally, it's not even just like the woman chooses the man. It's like actually also like the fact that like a woman can have one child per year basically, and a man can have like as many children as possible of women he can impregnate per year. So like you could theoretically have like a man with like 100 children per year if he had 100 women, but 100 men and one woman can only have one child per year. And like Africa's doing that too, I think. So it's like, okay, these third world backwards civilizations are going to crash their populations, and so on. And like the overwhelmed Western populations are kind of re-emerging from their dark ages to be like, oh, we need to have children ourselves. And they don't necessarily abort specifically to avoid girls. The people that have abortions tend to abort people because they don't want to have children, and they're too lazy to use a condom. So it's the very raw, strict reason why the population will decline, but I'm hopeful for the Western civilization to have more population relative to the rest of the world. And I think that's a good thing because I think that ethnically and racially, Westerners tend to be better at maintaining civilization. Maybe it's just cultural, maybe it's not racial, but like, I'm not gonna like try and push for racial policies. I think it's just a natural outcome of inferiority and superiority um, that will play out on its own without anyone pushing for it. And I'm actually against people pushing for it. This is just my analysis. And I'm content to let this happen without trying to force it because I think it'll happen anyways. And no, I'm not saying I'm not saying that I want those populations to disappear. I'm saying I want them to have less of a share of the population overall, and my people to have more of a share overall. But do keep in mind the Western population is like 8% of the world, and the other places are like blowing up. Um, Basically, because of Western welfare towards them, not because they're earning their well-being. They're basically blown up because we give them money, not because they're earning it. So it's like, okay, like that's their culture, that's their attitude, that's their way of life. Cut off the taps, cut off the parasites, and they'll just disappear eventually. And like the people of their races that are honorable and virtuous and ethical and work hard and try and earn money and so on will continue. So it's like a bit of an evolutionary filter for the least desirable people. That is not eugenics because it's very natural selection oriented. Um, um, I do believe culture is a byproduct of overall ethnic group psychological trends biologically. Um, I think that there's different people, and it does take all kinds to make the world go round to some extent. But I think there are such things as better and worse cultures, and I do believe that they do kind of have a certain biological element to them, and that there's a statistical generality and trend and emphasis based on psychology, based on biology of cultures, which is at least partially influenced by environment and climate and um, the animals that they have to deal with and the food they eat and so on. Um, and once more, I'm going to say this because people might misconstrue what I'm saying because I said there's a racial component. I'm strictly against any sort of genetic planning or uh, dealing death based on race and so on. I think this is an honest analysis of what's going to happen. Um, I don't care if it happens or not, as long as it's not forced. If a race or ethnicity or culture or civilization decides because of its psychological makeup, whether it's based on biology or just habit um, or whatever, to commit suicide, then so be it. But I'm not for murder. And and while I believe that ethnic groups and nationalities should kind of trend towards even their sort of undesirables having one child, maybe, if they want to have a child, in a monogamous, stable relationship, specifically, that they should see to it that their own people have that option, even if they're not necessarily the most productive individuals, as long as they're not seriously critically deficient, and so on. Now that could play out. What's the word? That could play out. I think it's an E word. It's not quite evolved. It's emergently. It could play out as an emergent property where someone spending all their money on drugs can't afford a child, and no woman wants to have children with them. It could play out with someone being so mentally disabled that they cannot attract a woman sexually. It could play out where someone literally is mentally deficient and they remove their genitals. It could play out where someone who is not attracted to the reproductive partners and picks their own gender to sleep with, just biologically not being able to have children because they're not doing the thing that required to have children. Which means I'm also against buying babies and outside of. And the thing is, I'm not against infertile women using a surrogate necessarily, although I think that's very dangerous, morally speaking. I am against it for gay and lesbian people. Because I don't believe that if you're unwilling to sleep with the opposite sex, you should be able to have a child. I don't believe in Adam and Steve. I believe in Adam and Eve. I don't believe in Eve and Liv. I believe in Adam and Eve for having children, specifically. There's two reasons for this, which is one, homosexuals are a lot more likely to molest children than straights are, statistically, and it's just like I don't want to risk making like 10 times more children get raped, which is the actual study result of such. That's the study-backed ratio, 10 times with homosexuals as straights. And also because children to grow up healthily need a mother and father. That's why I'm strict on monogamy as well. You need a female and you need a male caretaker to appreciate the fullness of human existence when you're an adult. That's how you develop properly. And that's why I'm for monogamy as well, and I don't like single parenting event. I don't like the idea of single parents that often. I can grant that the occasional split is important when someone is a very bad partner and horrible person to their family. But that's something to be avoided if possible by a very long shot. There's way too many divorces between parents for convenience, or I got a vibe and I didn't have it before, but now I do, so therefore, like, goodbye. That sort of lack of commitment, or the like I mentioned the cunning versus wisdom thing, and basically the cunning thing is, I've got you now. I can be a horrible person and you'll stay, or something like that. It's not a good thing. That is one of the problems. Anyways, you'll notice that I'm basically saying, for the most part, merit Neediness talks, merit walks. And I am fully aware that the left cries that merit is racism because there's unequal outcomes. And the fact of the matter is, if merit is racist, then truth is racist. And I'm not going to be a lying, undeserving of good bastard. I'm going to be a truthful, deserving of goodness person. And we should all strive to be better. And if you refuse to be good, then you don't get good stuff, basically. And if you are insistent on being an idiot, then, you don't succeed. I mean, this is plain obvious. And if people are racially motivated to be an idiot, then they don't succeed very much. And them's the breaks. That is literally functionally baked into the system of reality that being an idiot doesn't get you good things. And if one group of people, for whatever reason, racial, cultural, environmental, choose to continue along that path, they don't get as good as the people that change for the better. And merit is something you can cultivate over your lifetime. It's not a static, God-given thing that stays the same all the time. It's a development and growth thing. Okay? It's a higher and higher resolution. It's a mapping out relations and nodes on a systematic map more and more accurately. Kind of process of growth. And those without merit should not be responsible for the cultivation of merit in the next generation. It's literally that simple because they don't have the merit themselves. They can't transmit the process of learning how to be better to the next generation. And a lot of the time, the people that refuse to get better over their lifetime don't get the ability to have children. And that's why men need to cultivate themselves to be better, because they're supposed to be the best at it overall on average, and the leaders of women to lead the woman in cultivating her merit. It's a lot of it is embodied and quite natural to the woman, but there are elements to it for sure, and there's serious elements to it that the man is often the reason the woman develops properly. Sabotaging and beating down the attempts to develop properly of a woman is a common misbehavior amongst bad men. And that should be fought, and that should be punished, and that should be warned against as well, on top of punishment and fighting against it. Because men are the height of personal development and merit, basically. When it comes to raw, principled, technical functionality as a demographic. That means the man is responsible for the failures of the woman and child more often than not, by a long shot. And the cultivation of men is important because they're also the ones, because they're the height of development potential in terms of technical and character development most often. And that is also their unique purpose. And that's one of the reasons why we're so hard on men, basically, and toughen them up and get them to control themselves despite stress and terror and pain and stuff like that. And I've already explained it before, but I'll explain it again. It's literally that the men are expendable once the child is born. At least not totally expendable. They're obviously kind of important. But like if it comes to pick one person to die in the family, child, wife, or husband, the husband can die. And like the child will survive and the woman will take care of it. And that's important because also, again, the women are the gatekeepers of reproduction. So you, like, if you had 1,000 people in a tribe and like there was 500 men and 500 women, and then like 499 women died, the tribe would be extinct. But if 499 men died, that one man could literally repopulate the entire tribe in like 20 years. Like fully grown adults repopulate in 20 years. Like he could have like 499 or 500 children, sorry, because there'd be 500 women. He could have 500 children in like a year. You know, and then you just raise the children. Or maybe 2 children. So 500 on one year, 500 the next, and then raise them all. And then you have about, there's slightly more men born than women. So it would be like, it would be like, let's see, well, there'd be about 1,000 women or 950 women and 550 men at that point, with the 500 one year, then 500 the next. You know what I mean? Whereas if you had the one woman, she could have a total of 20 women over 20 children over 20 years. So you'd have 498 men who are really stuck without a woman. And this is why more men are born than women, because the expectation is the man is going to do the fighting and the dangerous work, so they die off more often. It's brutal, it's harsh, it's Mother Nature, it's savage, it's nature red tooth and claw, it's cruel, but it's natural. It's Mother Nature and her logic. But also, typically speaking, in advanced animals, especially when their brains are developed to a certain extent, I think. Well, actually, no. It's pretty common. I mean, Jordan Peterson mentioned lobsters, and he got known as the Lobster Man for this reason. But basically, a common advanced animal distinction is that because the male is more expendable in combat, they also evolve such that because the strongest of them survive and the toughest of them survive and the most skilled at combat or hunting or something of them survive, and are the biggest and strongest and so on, females have naturally adapted to prefer the strongest of the males, and the males literally die off if they're weak, and the strong males get mating and reproduction access to have children. So there's a selection mechanism with men through a life or death process that makes the woman attracted to them when they're strong. But notice how the woman is not the one supposed to be in danger. The man is supposed to be in danger. The man is supposed to risk his life. I don't think there's a woman alive that doesn't want the man to protect her if something goes wrong. You know? And I don't know a real man that wouldn't protect his woman and child or something like that. Like, you might argue that some men are supposed to protect women and children in general and so on, and I agree with that. But it's like the same direction, and it's like an abstraction in that sense, whereas the family protection is the man's job in concrete terms. And as a result, there are more men born, and more men die off because they're weak or stupid. But also then a third option pops up, which is as an emergent property, is if a man is a coward and they never try and fight and win, the woman is adapted to not find them attractive. Which means that the man has completely avoided doing what he's supposed to, and the woman is turned off by it. And this is all derived from the simple fact that the man is technically expendable in a way that the woman or the child and then the woman are not expendable. And men simply got selection pressured into becoming stronger than women, even if they were relatively equal before. It's literally that simple. And intelligence and comical wit and senses of humor and like ways of playing with things mentally and conceptually that are fascinating and complex and a higher level than the women when it comes to coming up with it yourself is also selected for in males of the human race because we can communicate with language. So it's not all the jocks. Sometimes it's the nerds too. But if you're an idiot and you're weak and you're cowardly as a man, like, it just makes obvious sense that you would not get a real woman or like a good woman. And your children, if you had any at all to begin with, would not be very well off. So their bloodline might end relatively quickly, if not with you immediately. Yeah. Yeah, that's why wisdom is so important, because it's a functional awareness of the reality of things in a broader and broader situation, so you don't get fooled by people using malevolent cunning. And also, I will mention another thing, which is that women tend towards cunning and men tend towards wisdom. Now, despite the fact that I've basically said all this stuff about how cunning is awful and so on, you know, there is a certain joke about women being evil and so on, and that's also a lack of cultivation thing and so on. But like I said, there is actually a certain degree of appreciation for cunning in certain situations. It's a kind of a clutch, emergency clutch. Like how you clutch a game, you rescue it from the jaws of defeat. Women being naturally weaker mentally and physically kind of have to rely on cunning to navigate dangerous men sometimes a little bit and so on. And also an appreciation of cunning, like for instance, if the man uses wisdom and the woman uses cunning in a relationship, then the man can grow the woman, and the woman will naturally be the sort of diplomat or the advisor, and the man will be the king or the warrior. And there is an advantage to this, despite my previous statements about cunning and wisdom in general, which is that in the woman's case as cunning, if she loves the man honestly and wisely, she can use her cunning through her natural emotional intelligence when the man is being an idiot with a lack of wisdom. And also, she can teach the man how cunning operates so that he can be better aware of when other people do it. And that's one of the reasons why you need a man and a woman. And they need to be properly in their masculine and feminine roles. So all the advantages of wisdom I mentioned, but the woman is cunning more often than the man, and it's partly because you need a loving teacher who's good at that particular aspect to teach you the ins and outs of that side of life. Because both exist. And you don't want to fall prey to cunning, and you don't want to miss out on wisdom. Basically, that's what it boils down to. And when the woman teaches the man the tricks of her trade, the man can learn from it and increase his wisdom, and then use his own personally directed wisdom in the more complex, logical manner, and then incorporate her tricks of the trade as data points for a more fuller picture of wisdom, and then he can teach her the relations that he's developed with his own strength of mind in the more direct, logical, rational approach. And that's one of the ways that men and women develop together and grow together. And I'm pretty sure that's the exact mechanism of it. However, there's another dimension to this, which is a bit of a sort of secondary part to it, and it's kind of like an offset part of it, to offset the cunning and wisdom masculine and feminine dynamic, which is the men's sense of humor with their loved ones when it's sort of like a very non-hostile but sort of tricky, like dad jokes or something kind of approach, where it's like you've got a sense of humor, so you're demonstrating you can understand setups and punchlines, sort of like you can understand cunning is how you're demonstrating it in a non-hostile way that the woman can appreciate that you understand cunning, and you're teaching the child how the masculine approach to it is, and the wisdom approach to it is generally. And the woman teaches the kids how someone using cunning operates while loving them. So they're not just like tricking the kids all the time or something like that. But you notice how I think it's primarily women that do this, actually. I'm not sure. It might be men too. I mean, I was thinking of doing it myself with my kids if I have them. Where like you play peekaboo, and like you put your hands over your face, and the baby literally doesn't know you exist anymore. And then you like open your hands away from your face, and you're like peekaboo, and the kid's like, "Oh, there you are." Maybe the woman does that more often, and basically the cunning is sort of like the leftist evolution, navigating the streams of the ocean of reality, and wisdom is the planned construction, masculine element of the right wing, and so on. And that's why socialism is effeminate, and masculinity is Christian and conservative and right and capitalist. Yeah. So I hope I've explained my specific positions and the caveats and the offsets and everything else in a way that someone could look at and go, okay, that's what he's saying. If it's not something I've said absolutely already with the level of spiciness that I've mentioned, it's probably not something I can be construed as saying honestly, because I've been as spicy as I can be, basically, in my honest beliefs at this point. So if you're thinking it's spicier than what I've said already, it's probably not true about me. I know it's kind of not usually a good sign when you have to say that, but I wanted to get as brutally honest about everything as possible. As like just viciously, brutally honest, to like just establish my I'm not going to hide it credentials, basically, at this point. And like I said earlier, but I'll mention again one last time, I am against humans consciously manipulating genetics through Frankenstein science or murder or sterilization or lobotomy or anything like that. I believe in Mother Nature's natural selection, and maybe the exact dividing line between artificial human intervention and Mother Nature is a little blurred in some cases, but I think you can make a pretty good faith case that most people know what I mean when I'm against artificial human intervention of our genetic development and so on. Even in the case of those third world countries doing abortions of girls, um, that is an example of such artificial human intervention as an example. So I'm relatively consistent when you think about it. And and I believe that the population collapse and the lack of companionship for the men in those societies is just a natural consequence of plain Frankenstein science and eugenics and so on, basically. Um, yeah, that's how I square the circle basically on that, while being very brutal and harsh on those kinds of groups of people. Um, yeah,